Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Cybersecurity for the Small Business and Remote Worker. I'm Jolene Carey-Pace, the Program Coordinator at the Wilkes University Small Business Development Center. I'm so happy that all of you could join us for this session today.
I'm not hearing anybody.
Can everyone else hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear.
Maybe try leaving the room and then re-entering. And make sure you're connecting to audio when you enter the room. All right. Hopefully that fixes the technical difficulties. Before we begin today, I do want to thank Ken Anderson for partnering with us and sharing his presentation. Just a quick note for everybody to please put yourselves on mute so that we can avoid having any background noise. And also as we go along, you can type any questions that you might have into the chat box. And there will also be time at the end of the presentation to ask any questions. And with that, I will turn the program over to Ken. Thank you.
I have to unmute myself here. All right. Good morning, good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you could all join us. It's good to have you here, and we're gonna have a nice discussion today. I would like to, well, you can see the agenda. We're going to cover a number of things related to cybersecurity, and these are particular to the small business and the remote worker. Some of the things we'll talk about will be specific to working from home. Other things may pertain more to small businesses, but most of these things will pertain to just about everybody. And I'd like to introduce myself first. I am Ken Anderson. I am the Director of Managed Services for Ethixa Solutions, and we are a managed service provider, which means that we proactively manage and maintain the networks for small and medium-sized businesses. And security is a big part.
All right, I'm still, I still can't hear.
Barry's having trouble hearing us. I'm not sure what we can do about that, unfortunately.
You can't hear what?
I can't hear the video. I wonder why.
Because you don't have it turned on. You have to actually turn it on.
Let's...
Go to your...
All right, thank you. Let's see.
Can you hear me now? Press Alt-A to unmute your microphone.
Barry, are you able to hear us now?
Which is Alt-A.
Alt is...
Okay, hopefully Barry will be able to hear us in a few moments, but Ken, please proceed.
All right, at any rate, we help with the technology for small and medium-sized businesses, and with everybody or many people working from home, we've had to change the way we do things a little bit and also help people working from home. So we'd like to impart some of the things we've learned in this with this seminar today. Please make use of the chat, put your contact information in there, introduce yourselves through the chat so that other people may be able to make use of what you do. This might be a good networking opportunity for you. And in addition, I'd like to make this a little bit interactive. It's tough with a Zoom webinar like this to be very interactive, but I would like to encourage you to ask questions and make sure that we're answering the things that you would like to hear. So please feel free to do that and test out the chat. I put my contact information in the chat window, and I also have available a handbook in PDF with a number of the tips for cybersecurity that we're going to be talking about today, along with some additional things. And if you'd like that, you can email me and I'll send that right to you, no problems. So let's talk about security in the news. If you watch the news, if you go on the internet, You'll see information about hacks just about every day. There's something new. One of the biggest ones that has happened recently is the SolarWinds hack. And it's a pretty big deal because of the size and scope of the attack. SolarWinds is a company that makes network monitoring and management software. So there are a number of large companies and even smaller companies that use SolarWinds to help them manage their networks, which is a great thing, except that at some point in time, the mechanisms that SolarWinds uses to update their software were breached. And somebody, they suspect it was the Russians or somebody associated with the Russians, managed to insert malicious payloads into those updates. And they laid dormant for a long time and managed to infiltrate over 18,000 different government and corporate networks. And it's a big mess that is going to take a long time to really clean up. Just recently, that's this month, the database, the user database for Nitro PDF was breached, and they lost the usernames and passwords and possibly other information for 77 million user accounts. And even more recently, VMware just released an exploit was found in VMware that lets people, malicious hackers, gain access to networks that they shouldn't, that are using VMware. So most of these may not impact you directly, but this is the kind of thing that is going to be happening more and more frequently. And so what we're going to be talking about today is some of the general things that you can do to protect yourself across the board. There's no perfect protection, but each step you take gets you better prepared for eventualities, and we want to guide you in that. If you watch the news or have read articles, you'll see all kinds of different terms about cybersecurity threats. And it can be confusing about what to understand what people are talking about. So I just like to give you a quick rundown on what some of these terms mean, so that when you see them, you know exactly how that might impact you. Virus, that's a very common term, and that simply means that it's a computer program that replicates itself by attaching itself to another program. The first viruses weren't even malicious. They were just a fun programming exercise. But now they've become a way to spread malicious things. Worms replicate like a virus, but they don't even attach themselves to other programs. They're more of a self-replicating thing. Trojan horses are programs, malware that looks like something else and fools users or misleads users about its true intent. So you think you're getting one thing, and then you try it out and it turns out to be another thing. Blended threats are what most successful attacks are these days. It's a malware or exploit that combines a number of different attacks at different levels to exploit different vulnerabilities. So a blended threat may be something that even starts with some social engineering, scouring a Facebook page to get contact information, and then using that contact information to contact the receptionist at a front desk, and leveraging the information that the attacker already has to gain further information, so that then they can send a targeted email to gather more information before they eventually deliver their payload or whatever it is that they're doing, and it gets very sophisticated. Malware is simply a malicious piece of software, and ransomware is one of the more common issues that small businesses and even home users experience today, because it's a malware that encrypts all of your data. So you have your data, you have your computer, you have your data there, but you can't use it because it's all encrypted. And the hacker wants a ransom. They want to be paid to unencrypt that software. And that's happened many, many times. I'm sure hospitals and governments and agencies have been ransomwared, and it's a scary thing when it happens. Spam is simply junk email or unsolicited mail, but that can have malware in with it, or phishing, which we're going to talk about. Phishing is an attempt to obtain sensitive information, whether it's usernames or passwords or other personal information, through a disguised email or IM. And I'm sure just about everybody has seen these come through. It looks like it's from your bank, or it looks like it's from Amazon or UPS or anywhere, and they say, "Ooh, your account's expired. Click here." And you don't ever want to do that, because when you click, it takes you to a site that may even look legitimate, but once you put your username and password information in there, it's been stolen from you. Spear phishing is a more targeted type of phishing attack. It means they will have personal information that they can use to make it look like it's coming from someone you know specifically, with maybe even some personal information to try to convince you that it's from that person. But it's malicious, and again, they're trying to get more information from you, or trying to get you to transfer funds by wire, or something like that. DDoS is something that usually affects larger companies. You may even see it affecting big organizations like Google or Microsoft or Yahoo or other places, and that's a denial of service. Somebody targeted, they might use what the next thing, a botnet, which is malware infected computers that are hijacked for use by another party to deliver spam, for one thing, or mine cryptocurrency, or function as a whole bunch of systems that can attack and create a denial of service, a DDoS attack. A hacker is a computer expert using knowledge to overcome a problem. Hackers don't have to be bad, but that's usually the connotation we give them. So usually when we say hacker, we're talking about somebody that's breaking into a system or accessing systems illegally. Lost or stolen data is a very big problem, and that can either be accidental or intentional. And since we're talking about threats, we don't usually think of it, but employees can be a threat. And again, that's an accidental data loss can be caused by an employee, intentional data theft, poor email practices, unauthorized USB sticks or software, unauthorized web browsing. All of those things can lead to bigger problems down the road.
Ken, we do have one question in the chat box asking, is email a typical route used to attack computers?
Email it depends on what level. Yes, email is very commonly used to attack computers, whether it's a phishing attack to gain personal information, or malware right in the email, which doesn't happen as much because there's a lot more filtering on email systems, but it still does occur. And email may just be the start of the attack. Once the attacker gains information through emails, they may leverage that to launch some other type of attack. So being vigilant about what you're doing with your email is very important. And we'll cover that a little bit more as we go along here. Good question. Working from home is a wonderful thing from in my opinion. I've been doing it for many years, and so a lot more people are getting to experience both the upsides and the downsides of working from home. And it can be a very good thing for companies to let their employees work from home, because they have reduced resource use in the office and a number of other things. But there are issues that come up when the workforce moves to home offices. You have an increased attack surface, because instead of just protecting a main office, now you have all of your employees at separate locations that each have an access point that can be attacked. Network traffic is increased because now you're emailing more, you're file sharing more, you're using more cloud services. All of these things are not bad things, but it does make it more challenging to protect your systems. Access to quality IT support is a challenge. When everybody's in an office, you can have an IT staff that can support that whole office. It's much more challenging when everybody's spread out to homes, and that's one of the things that we do, is assist other companies with that IT support when everybody's spread out. It also increases the likelihood of a phishing attack having success, because now you have less direct contact with the people that you're emailing back and forth, and it makes it a little bit easier for suspicious emails to zip through without thinking, oh, that might be a suspicious behavior. And when people are working from home, they might not even be using a company computer, or the computer that is a company computer might be also used for personal use. And when you do that, now you're opening up, if you let your kids use your computer, you don't know what they might be putting on the computer that could affect you. So it increases those issues as well. Almost everybody working from home is going to be doing so over a Wi-Fi network. And this is probably one of the weakest points in a work from home environment. If you've got an older or a lower end off the shelf router, it may not be really up to the task. It may not have great throughput, which could cause you productivity issues, but it also may be out of date with its firmware and software, and may not protect against all the attacks. So it's really important to pick a router that is current, that is good as far as protections, that has a good firewall in it. It's not just, you don't want it to be just a router. You want it to have a good firewall that checks the traffic coming in to make sure that it's not malicious. You want to set it up correctly with a good password on your Wi-Fi network, and you want to regularly update that router's firmware and software to make sure that it's safe and current. Change the router's default password. Don't ever leave the default password, and make sure your Wi-Fi password itself is secure. Don't make it the name of your cat or something. Use something that people aren't going to guess. And we also recommend implementing a VPN if you're using Wi-Fi. A VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. And a virtual private network is a way to create a tunnel that encrypts the data that travels along that tunnel. If you're on a Wi-Fi network, anybody else on that Wi-Fi network, you may not even know that other people are there, but anybody else on that Wi-Fi network has access to the information that you are broadcasting back and forth, because it's just going over the air like in radio waves. So one way to help protect you, and you definitely always want to do this if you're on some kind of a public Wi-Fi network, is to use a VPN, and that is a virtual private network. A virtual private network encrypts the data that you're sending and receiving into its own private tunnel, so that even though you're broadcasting it through the air and other people might be able to hack and eavesdrop and pick up that transmission, they won't be able to read it or understand it, because it's an encrypted set of communications, and without the key, they won't be able to know what's going on. And there's a number of quality VPNs. I wouldn't recommend any of the free ones. You'll see a number of free ones available, but even the ones that you have to pay for are not very expensive. Just a couple off the top of my head would be NordVPN, Private Internet Access, Surfshark, those things. They're pretty easy to set up and install. You can even put them on your cell phones, and I would highly recommend that. Email Somebody asked if email was a typical route to attack computers, and it is very much the case. So we talked about phishing and spear phishing, but there's also financial scams and tech support scams, and malware and ransomware. All of these things are dangers that may not be as obvious as you might think. Some of them are obvious, but others might slip through unnoticed. So what do you do to protect yourself against these things? Number one, stay informed. Doing things like this webinar is a good step. Reading tech news. I know I do it all the time because it's part of my job, but just keeping up to date on some of the things that are out there can't hurt you. Number two, don't click on a link in an email. That's my number one piece of advice to anyone. If you get an email, no matter who it's from, even if it looks legitimate, if there's a link in it, don't click on it. If it's from Amazon or UPS or your bank, don't click on the link. They tell you your account's expired or they need information. Maybe it's legitimate, but don't click on it. Just go to that website on your own and just sign in without clicking on the email. Also, be wary. Suspect everything is fake, and it'll protect you. Take a look at what the links are. If you get an email that's from a friend, it says, "Hi, this is Bob. How are you doing today?" And then you look at the email address and it's from zizzlebobs@gmail.com. Well, it's probably not legitimate. And also look at the links, because the link may say one thing, but if you hover your cursor over it, you find out it's from strange sites. So be very, very careful about where those emails are coming from. Also, keep your computer up to date. Windows updates, Apple updates, antivirus updates, Office updates. All of your software should be kept up to date. Many, many of the updates that are put out are security related updates. And you also want to make sure that you have good, up-to-date antivirus installed. In addition to email, the software you use can be vulnerable to viruses, to ransomware, to just poor programming practices, to hackers that know what the vulnerabilities are in the software. And there's some key things you can do to protect yourself against those areas. Number one, keep your computer up to date. Update your Windows, update your, and this is a little trickier if you're not an IT guy, update your BIOS, which is the screen that pops up when you boot, and your firmware. And you may need to get some tech help to do that. But you also want to use reputable, up-to-date antivirus, such as Symantec or Norton or Bitdefender, Kaspersky, Sophos, those things. Keep the rest of your software up to date. We're using Zoom today, but Zoom has had some vulnerabilities in it. So you want to make sure your Zoom is up to date, your Adobe, your QuickBooks, your Java, your web browsers, your Office suite, all of these things. And browse safely. Be careful on the internet. Don't go to weird corners of the web where dangers lurk. Excuse me just a minute. I apologize. I've got a dry throat here. Insecure passwords are dangerous. Using a weak password that is easy to guess or simple is not a good idea. Sharing passwords, and I don't, by password sharing, I don't mean sharing passwords with your friends, or your family members, which isn't a good idea. But by password sharing, I mean sharing passwords between accounts. How many of us have 1, 2, 3 passwords that we use everywhere? It's very common, because who wants to remember 785 different passwords? Who can possibly remember 785 different passwords? But it's really important that you don't share passwords between accounts. And there are ways to do that. So some recommendations would be to use strong passwords or phrases. By strong passwords, we're talking about passwords that have a mix of upper and lowercase, numbers, and symbols in them. And they need to be at least 8 characters long, preferably 12 to 16. You want to use a different password for every account. That way, if somebody is breached, which is going to happen, it happens all the time, they get your username and password for that account, but not for your other accounts. If you're sharing passwords, they can get access to all kinds of stuff just by breaching one place. And the only way to really do that is to use a password manager. A password manager lets you have a database of passwords, and that database itself is encrypted so that even the developer of the password manager can't get access to any of your passwords. But it also lets you have a separate password, a random strong password for every single account. And that password manager helps fill in the password when you go to different sites. And you can use that. You can use the password manager on every computer and on your cell phones, and it makes things much safer and easier to use. There's a number of password managers we can recommend: LastPass, Dashlane, Keeper. Most of them have some kind of a free version and a paid version that has more features. I also recommend implementing MFA on everything that you can. MFA is multi-factor authentication, so that when you log in, you're not using just a password, you're also using a second method of authentication. And the one we would recommend would be an authentication app on your cell phone. You can use email authentication, where the site sends you an email with a code that you have to put in, or a text message, but those are less safe than an authenticator app. Google has an authenticator app. There's one by Duo, there's one by Microsoft, and those are free apps to download. And you get them set up, and then when you log in, you just check your app and just type in the little code, and boom. I'd also recommend subscribing to a site such as haveibeenpwned.com. And anytime there is a breach of accounts, where your email address or your account name is identified, you would get a notification letting you know that had happened, so that you can change your passwords for that account. Most of the password managers have that built into them as well. Okay, I see that we have a question here. Hi, Ken. What is more likely, someone guessing a user password or someone hacking the website and accessing user's account? That is a good question, and that really depends on the passwords that you're using and the website. So we've seen websites hacked on a fairly regular basis, and accounts downloaded very often. So when that happens, it doesn't really matter what your password is, it can be taken in that kind of an instance. However, if you're using a simple password like password, which people do, believe it or not, then guessing that password is also going to be pretty easy, because there are ways to attack those databases and guess passwords. They'll do brute force attacks. A computer can shoot 10,000 passwords a second at a website if the website isn't set up correctly, and get in through brute force attacks. So I would say if you're using very good passwords, then it's more likely someone will hack the website and gain access to account information. And that's why you need to use a different password for every account. You need to protect in both cases. And another question, is the two-step authentication process effective? Yes, it's very effective. It increases, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is tremendously more effective to have a username, a password, and multi-factor authentication than it is to have just a username and password. If you're using multi-factor authentication and somebody hacks the website and steals all the accounts, they still can't get into the site with your credentials because they don't have your multi-factor code. It's not perfect. There are ways around some of those. Nothing is ever perfect, but it increases your security by a large margin. Good questions. When we talk security, I always talk backup. Because what are we talking about? We're talking about securing our data and our information and our businesses. And accidents happen, and disasters happen, even if nobody malicious is trying to do things. So not having your data backed up, not having your applications and configurations backed up, and being reliant on hardware without a replacement available are all dangers and threats to your business and your work. So there's some things you can do to make sure that that's not the case. Recommendations we would make include making sure you have a backup, first of all, preferably one that doesn't just store things on site, but replicates things off site. I mean, what happens if, God forbid, you have a fire or something? Now you've lost all of your information, but you've also lost your backups too. So you want to have something that replicates off site. And there's a number of services that do this, that are geared towards the small business and the home user. Carbonite is one of them, and we use some other vendors. We also recommend using image-based backup. Rather than just backing up your information, you're taking snapshots of the entire system so that when you restore, you have all of your serial numbers and passwords and login keys and all of that restored all at once, rather than trying to rebuild a system and recreate it and having just your data backed up. We also recommend having spare hardware available. Think of the things that you rely on. You're going to rely on a computer, so you want to have a spare for that. But also, most of us probably rely on the internet for just about all of our work. So if you've got a single point of failure anywhere in there, whether it's a modem or a router or a switch or something like that, it would be good to have a backup for that. Some people rely on printers, webcams, those things. Anything that is critical for your business, it's a good idea to have a spare handy. These are going to be we're going to talk about key components for having a good cybersecurity environment. And a lot of these will be more relevant to a small business, but there's pieces of these that apply to everyone. And we like to start with user training, because users, employees, yourself, if you're in business for yourself, can be the biggest strength or the biggest weakness. And the way to ensure that employees are a strength instead of a weakness is through user training, to do things like this. Threat awareness is really important. Understanding what phishing and spear phishing is, what that looks like. Preparing your receptionist for thinking about social engineering. Is that call that I just got legitimate, or are they just searching for information? Be careful about the information that's provided. Yes, you need to be helpful to your customer base, but you also have to be careful. Look out for fake email and internet links. Know what they look like. What is the problem of taking data home on a flash drive and then, having that flash drive fall out of your pocket on the way to the car? Those types of things. Establish best practices and make sure you know make sure your employees know what they are. Practice good network security. All of these things are very, very important. Company policies. We talked about this a little bit, but it's good to have policies in place that everyone understands for security. And we're talking a lot about digital security, but physical security is just as important. If you leave your laptop in an unlocked car and somebody steals it, that's going to be a bad thing. But maybe you encrypted that laptop, which really helps out. Encrypt your cell phone. That's physical security and digital security. Make sure access to documents and files is set to least permissive so that nobody has access to things that they shouldn't. If somebody doesn't have access to something that they need, they're going to tell you about it. But if anyone has access to something that they're not allowed to have, they're not going to let you know that they can access files that they shouldn't. It just doesn't happen that way. So it's always best to lock things down really hard and then open things up as little as you need to. Be aware about how you're handling data in email. Don't send sensitive information over email, passwords and personal information, those types of things. Flash drives. Be careful about what you're sharing on social media. Hackers will use social media information against you for phishing and spear phishing attacks. And we already talked about being careful with the wireless internet. And welcome vendor and partner security audits. Have your own networks audited. Make sure that your vendors are having their networks audited. Some of the biggest breaches in history have come through third parties. So those are all things you need to be careful for. IT management is really important. And for the home user, this is something you're probably going to be doing on your own. Or you can find, if you can find somebody that can help you out, that would be a good idea. You want to make sure that you're keeping your Windows and software up to date. You're including your firewalls. A lot of these things pertain to smaller and medium-sized businesses and even larger business. So if we're talking about applications, security, firewalls, and network segmentation, we're talking about certainly home users will have a firewall in their router. You want to make sure that's configured well and up to date. You want to be careful about your application security and make sure that your applications are up to date, that it's password protected and those things. Network segmentation is something that happens in larger networks. You can lock off more secure segments of your network. And consider email filters. A lot of antivirus programs will have email filters built in. So you'll want to configure those. Multi-factor authentication, we've already talked about. And mobile device management is something that companies should consider for their employees. Mobile device management, MDM, is a way to set requirements on mobile devices so that if somebody's accessing company files and emails and things through a mobile device, such as a cell phone or a tablet or a laptop, you can set requirements on that device before they're allowed to connect and get those things. Make sure that it's password protected, make sure that it's got antivirus that's up to date, make sure that the entire drive is encrypted, make sure that there's a PIN and a lockout, and it also can give the ability to remove data if a device is lost or stolen. So if somebody's cell phone is lost, you can remotely delete all company email and information from that cell phone. And that can be very helpful in protecting you from data loss. Antivirus. The things I have here generally pertain to businesses because we recommend having centralized management for antivirus. A business is going to have multiple computers, and it's best to have some kind of a platform that lets you update all of those computers regularly, identify when they're hit by viruses, message users, all of those type of things. So there are business-centric antivirus programs that offer centralized management. You want to have protection for all devices, and that means your laptops, your desktops, your servers, your phones, everything should be protected. And you want to protect each level. Your internet browsing should be protected. Your email needs to be protected. Files need to be protected. Programs that are running should be scanned. We also believe that heuristic detection is important. Heuristic detection means that the antivirus program looks for the behaviors of a virus, not just known viruses. Most viruses are going to be known fairly quickly, but there's always a lag between when a virus is released and when it gets known about. So it's good to have the type of detection that can detect the behaviors of a virus so that even unknown viruses can be caught. And we also recommend frequent updates because the landscape of attacks shifts very quickly. Question here, is Norton a good product? Yes, Norton is sufficient for at least most home users. Could you please share the list of password keepers and antivirus programs you suggested? Yes, I will. I'll write that in the chat here after the seminar is complete. I'd be happy to do that. Backup, we talked about this before, but this is so important. There's no way to 100% protect yourself from malicious attacks, from ransomware, from disasters, fire, flood, loss, that type of thing. So you want to have a contingency. You want to have a backup just in case something does happen. It's great to go through all of the effort to protect yourself on the front end, but you also want to make sure that you're covered just in case something does happen. And when we talk about backup, we start with recovery, because without recovery, your backup doesn't do you any good. I can't tell you how often I've seen people say, oh yeah, I have a backup, and then they pull it out and they realize they've never tested it and it doesn't work. So we always start with recovery. Make sure you can recover not just your data, but everything that you need, and that's really important. Consider whether you're storing things locally or offsite or cloud. You can store things in multiple locations. You can never have too much backup. You might spend too much money on it, but I don't know that there's any such thing as too much backup. Also need to consider whether you're backing things up that's hardware dependent or virtualization. If you're doing hardware dependent restores, that means you need to have a piece of hardware to replace the one that you lost before you can restore. If you've got the option to do virtualization, you might be able to get your information back up and running quickly, more quickly, while you're waiting for hardware to be replaced. It's really important also to have a recovery plan. Start planning now before you have a disaster event, and it'll make recovering from that disaster much easier because you already have an idea of what to do. Even if it's just a framework and not detailed, at least you'll know where to start. You want to start with a risk analysis, identify, and every company, every home user is going to have a different set of risks. Some people might have to worry about floods, other people might not, it's going to depend on who you are, what you're doing. And so identify your risks. From those risks, develop an incident response plan. Choose how you're going to respond to each risk that you have identified. I'd also recommend looking into cybersecurity insurance. If you are hit with malware or ransomware or something of that nature, it's going to cost money to mitigate that, to recover from that, to restore your data. There might be lost time. Your customers may be impacted. It can be a very big deal and very expensive. So having cybersecurity insurance to assist with that is very important. If we're talking about a cybersecurity incident itself, there is a process to go through to recover from that. And this is just a real quick summary of that process. Once you identify that there's been a cybersecurity incident, and it could be a hack, it could be ransomware, it could be a virus, whatever it is, first you need to isolate and quarantine the assets that are affected. Get them isolated so that they can't affect other systems. Step 2, notify anyone impacted. That means your employees, your board of directors, your company, your customers, whoever is impacted by that, make sure that they get notified. Change passwords immediately to stop that from going any further. Then start your mitigation efforts with antivirus and malware scans, restoring from a backup, and getting your systems back to where they were, and then go through and install system software and updates, add more protections if necessary. And then once you're restored, once you're back in business and you're better protected than you were, get a third-party test or security audit to make sure that there's not something you're missing. Have somebody from the outside test you out. With all of these things, with all of the protections against threats and the cybersecurity issues, we've talked about a number of things, and it's really hard to do all of them at once. You can't really do all of them at once, but keep in mind that you're only as strong as your weakest link. So take a look at each of these things, identify the weakest link, and start there. Shore that up, then look for the next weakest link and shore that up. And this is a process. This is not something that is ever done. You never get to say, oh, I'm safe, my cybersecurity is perfect, let's call it a month. Unfortunately, there's always new evolving threats, and in the IT world, things are always changing. So this is a process. It's something you need to continuously evaluate and protect against to keep yourself safe. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have. And I will, let's see, I will fill out this. I will add those. Big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., have access to a lot of our data information because we agreed to it in order to use their services. We all understand that they use some of that info for advertisement targeting, etc. Are you aware of other use of this info that is less known to the general public and that would suggest that we pay more attention to the fine print in the 100-page long user agreement? Facebook has been portrayed as a villain in the industry, but are they alone? That is a very good question, and I don't know that I have a terrific answer to that. Some of these companies are almost monolithic in their scope. So Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google and Microsoft and a number of companies, they're so large, they have access to so much information about us. And I can't say, I'm lax in this. I can't say that I've sat down and read every single sentence and every single agreement that I have signed up to. So I am certain that there are things that they are doing with that information that I am not aware of. And maybe I should pay more attention to that myself. But that is a good reminder that we should be very careful about what information we are giving to any of these companies, because even if they don't use it against us, somebody else might be able to get access to that information and use it against us. very, very interesting question. I'm not sure that I answered it very well, but that is a great question. My preferred backup software. I don't know that I can answer that question either, because one of the things that we do at Afixa is we try to be a technology agnostic. We evaluate a specific need and then identify the technology or the software that is best for that need. So each, companies have different amounts of data they're backing up that needs to have different types of security levels. The data might be stored in different locations, and they have different restoration requirements. So all of those things change dramatically the type of backup solution that we would recommend. And one thing I would say is, before implementing a backup solution, review it. We prefer to use companies that are trustworthy, because you're trusting them with your data. So make sure that you are using a company that's not going to fold or go out of business in short order. So the larger companies are quite often a better choice for that. Microsoft's probably not closing next month. And so as far as backup providers, there's some very good backup providers out there that are reputable. And check the tech sites, ZDNet, CNET, PC Magazine. They all have reviews and recommendations based on what you're trying to back up and what your needs are. Is there any risk using a webcam for Zoom meetings versus just using your computer? Do you have any suggestion on available webcams? When you say just using your computer, do you mean using Zoom without a webcam, or do you mean using the webcam built into a laptop? Not quite sure I understand the question. I don't know that there's usually too much risk with a webcam, although again, is similarly to the backup question, I would recommend using a name brand webcam. There's a lot of really cheap off-brand webcams that come from who knows where, and with technology, you don't necessarily know what is in those electronics and what they could be capturing or using. Maybe I'm a little more paranoid than most, but it's pretty easy to put some kind of a little chip in a device like a webcam that allows that information to be sent places you don't want it to go. So I would recommend a Logitech or a Microsoft webcam or something that is considered more trustworthy before I went with some strange Chinese off-brand camera. And be careful about your camera. Disable it when you're not using it, unplug it when you're not using it. Most of them have locks on them and things. Windows now lets you disable access to webcams from other software. So take a look at those controls and make sure you're using them. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to grab that information about the backup software. Let me see. I'm trying to remember what the question was now.
Oh, password keepers and antivirus programs.
Password keepers and antivirus. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. All right.
And I'll copy that information as well and send that in an email to our participants.
And I'll just remind everybody, I do have a cybersecurity handbook I can send anyone that's interested. So if you'd like that, just shoot me your email address, send me an email, or type it in the chat here, whatever you want, and I will I will send you that handbook, and I'll make sure I don't put any links in it, so you don't have anything to click on.
All right, while Ken is typing that information up in the chat, I'll wrap things up here. And I just like to say thank you to Ken for being here with us today and sharing his presentation. I know we all benefited from his talk today on such a timely topic. I do have just a few housekeeping notes. I'll be making available the recording of this training on the Wilkes University SBDC YouTube channel, and I'll email that link to all attendees as well. Also, I'll be emailing the link to a post-event survey so that we can determine which of our resources will best suit your needs and what topics you would like to see as training sessions in the future. And as I mentioned, I will take that information that Ken is typing up in the chat and include that in my email to everybody.
All right. All right, thank you all. I appreciate your attendance today.
Thank you very much, Ken, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your weekends, everyone.
Bye, everyone.